And welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment of our show brought to you by Phil Cobble, Fine Homes and Land. Phil and his team, I know, proud to salute the memory of Pat Summitt with us today. All right, I want to welcome in some special guests from the Lady Vols side of the family today. We have next to us Joan Cronin, longtime Tennessee Women's Athletic Director. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
We have former Lady Vols sitting right here. We've got Hall of Fame members. We've got national championship winners. We've got first team members. We have Shelly Sexton Collier right here and Lisa McGill-Reagan right there. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Joan, I thought it was interesting. Sally Jenkins, who wrote 3 books with Pat and is one of the best columnists in the country, she wrote a very good piece this week, and in it, she asked different people to sum up Pat Summitt in a word. Well, she spoke to Carol Lawson. Carol Lawson said kaleidoscope because she changed your outlook on everything. Brilliant. At one point, she had asked Pat Summitt, how would you describe yourself in a word? And Pat's word, I think, would surprise people. Subversive.
You know, that kind of surprised me, too. I think of Pat as strategic, and I think her as driven. And she was always doing 10 things at the same time. You know, sometimes you say you'll give your shirt off your back to somebody. Well, I remember a time we flew into Atlanta. Pat was giving a speech. I was introducing her, and we were running late. And we go change clothes in the restroom, and I hear this, "Oh, no." Well, Pat had 2 left shoes. So I gave her the shoes off my feet where she could wear them because her shoes were bigger and I could make out. So, you know, all of us would have given the shirt off our back, the shoes off our feet to help Pat. But she was driven, but she was strategic too.
Shelley, thoughts? I mean, is there anything, and again, we've talked about it, and you see it on the screen right there, that she said when she had the disease, when she announced that this was not going to be a pity party, it's been a week of sadness, obviously, but I want this to be kind of a moving forward, a turning of the direction, and let's be positive. Give me a positive story about Pat Summitt that you recall that brings a smile to your face.
Well, one of the things that we all do when we get together as Lady Vols is we tell Pat Summitt stories, and most of the time they're very funny, so I'm sure that I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of young ladies this morning that played for her. But one that stands out as I was driving over, it wasn't when I was playing, it was after I finished my playing for her. I stayed and was a graduate assistant. And so a lot of times when you're a graduate assistant, we don't have the technology. We didn't have the technology that they have now.
Right.
And so we had to break down film all the time. And we had to dub offensive series and dub defensive series. Well, I got brave. Lisa Webb was also a student assistant with me. And we were sitting there working on some things, getting ready to take a road trip to Mississippi. And before one of our practices, we were to watch film in her room. So Lisa and I snuck a tape of Pat when she played in our bags and took it with us. And so we were supposed to put up the film she wanted the team to watch in that team meeting, and instead we put the video in of Pat playing, and she had no idea we were going to do that, and we were kind of taking a risk. You know, we didn't know if she was going to get mad or not. But we were like, who is that right there? They're not in her defensive stance. Anyway, the players cracked up. They loved it. And Pat just, with her look,
sort of gave the alert.
She didn't get on to us, but it was funny.
Well, she let the team have their fun.
She absolutely did.
Absolutely. Lisa, thoughts on Pat Summitt? You got a story? A story that you can tell, I should say?
I have stories I can't tell, but I have one I can tell. I guess one of my fondest memories later in the process of the Alzheimer's was the day we played golf at Sevierville Golf Club, and that was the day that Pat hit her hole-in-one. Pat set the rules for how you were going to play for the day because she wanted to win, and that was the utmost thing, was to win. Well, Billy Moore's a very good golfer, so Pat chose Billy as her partner, and Debbie Antonelli and I were partners. We played 5 or 6 holes, and Debbie and I had won every hole, so Pat was not happy. So she said, well, we're changing the rules. We said, okay. So she decides that we're going to hit from the men's tees. Okay. So we go on. We're still winning. We get to the 17th hole, and Pat's favorite club, everyone knows, was the 7-iron. She gets up on this par 3. Debbie and I have already hit. I hit a good shot for once in my life. We watched Pat hit, and we thought, Debbie looked at me, and she said, that looked pretty good. I said, okay. So we go around, we get up on the green, we see one ball laying there, and that's my ball. And Pat goes, no, that's my ball. I said, no, I hit a Titleist. It's my ball. So Debbie goes over, looks in the hole, and she pulls this Ram ball out. I've never seen one before, never seen one since. I said, is that your ball, Pat? Yeah, has to be my ball. I hit a good ball. I said, okay, Coach. I said, never seen a ball like that. Where'd you find it? She said, found it in the woods. All right. So Debbie tweets that she's hit the hole in one. We get inside. We take the ram ball. We spit on it. We clean it up. We get it all ready. She signs it. She signs it upside down. Ram is upside down. So Billy Moore, Debbie and I look at it. We think, okay, we're going to sign it right side up. So we all sign our name on it. Forever to this day, probably, on that trophy is sitting all of us upside down and Pat Summitt right side up.
That's right side up. But, you know, there have been stories that have come out about her cutting loose. You know, we've heard that this week. That's not necessarily something, you know, people picture her with the glare, very serious, as you say, driven, strategic. She had a side where she would let her hair down, so to speak. As a player, did you ever see that side, or was that compartmentalized? You never saw fun Pat Summitt until you got out of your uniform, or did you know that when you were playing for her? Did she ever show a fun side then?
Well, she loved to have fun. There's nobody that loved to have any more fun than Pat. And, you know, dancing was not one of her, we've all talked about that already.
Right.
And I know we tried to get her to dance a number of times, and she just wouldn't do it, you know. And finally, the second national championship, she promised us that she would dance on the table if they had won a national championship. And again, I was a GA that year. And so after that game, she actually literally got on the table and danced.
She did. We walked in this donor's home where we're having a party, and I know she's promised him she's going to dance on the table. And I walked in, it was a glass table. Ooh. My heart went here. But she did. She danced. Not well, but she danced, but she didn't break the table.
Well, you made the comment in between segments here that not only were people nervous when she climbed up on the pyramid dressed as the cheerleader, you had a little bit extra lump in your throat.
I did too. And, you know, I've been with Pat in championship games. I've been to the White House. All these places, she was always calm. That night, when she knew she was going out there in that cheerleading uniform, her blood pressure was as high as I've ever seen it. But, you know, she knew she should do it, and she did it. And when she went up, it was kind of like we were building habitat houses one day, and I'm out helping everybody, and I look up, and Pat Summitt and Candace Parker are on the roof. I immediately said, gang, time out. There are people we can send to the roof, but not Candace and Pat.
Where are the walk-ons?
Yeah.
Get them to the roof. You had a story before the show about, I believe, it involved trying to avoid a speeding ticket. We were talking about Pat Summitt's story.
Pat always believed if you left late, to get there on time, you had to drive fast. So needless to say, she visited with policemen along the way. And Pat always kept signed basketballs in her trunk in case she got stopped.
Just in case.
Just in case.
Just a little bit of a trade there. In terms of, and this is something that whatever coach you talk about, people always have an affinity for, well, not always, but most people have an affinity for their coach. But it did seem unique in terms of the family, the familiar relationship that she had with her players. And that carried for so long after the playing days. Lisa, you were on one of the first teams, if not her first team, second team?
Second team.
Second team. Talk about that relationship that she had with her former players, with her current players, how that continued and grew over time.
Pat made a very special attempt to make sure that we were all considered just the same as the team that was playing at the time. We were taken in, and you were always treated as though you were very, very, very special. And I know I tore my knee up in the spring of '77 after we had finished third in the nation. And my mom was just worn out with the whole thing, and I spent like 8 days in the hospital. And about midway through, after I'd had my surgery, Pat called my mom and said, I'll stay with her tonight. Well, she was dating RB at the time, and they had been to a big conference for bankers in Gatlinburg. And in she comes. She ate all my chocolates that my friend had sent me from Old Smoky Candy Kitchen. And about midway through the night, she said, I said, Pat, get up. You got to help me. And I was soaking wet. I was just drenched. And, of course, she had to get all my clothes off. We had IVs. We had everything. And I can remember as we settled back in and laid down, she was on the cot beside me, and she reached up and she grabbed my hand and she said, I love you, Lise. That was the Pat Summitt we knew.
Yeah. Good stuff. When we come, we will have more with Lisa and Shelley. Joan, you stick right there for a second. When we come back, have you heard the story about the time Pat Summitt gave the pregame talk before a UT game against Kentucky? You're about to. Come on back on the Sports Source.